Welcome to the show, Christine.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. It's been a long time coming.
Right?
I like the hoodie. Does that say recovery?
It does, yeah.
That's awesome. What is your recovery date?
My recovery date is 4/14/2013.
Oh, wow. So you got 11 years then.
I do.
That's awesome. Congrats.
Thank you.
What was going on for 2013?
Oh, 4/13/2013. This is actually a comical story. So, by this time and I'm sure at some point we'll kind of dive into the rest of the stuff, but by this specific date, I had managed to get off the hard drugs. I was an IV drug user for a lot of years, but I had managed to get off of that. But I had started drinking because, I never had a drinking problem. Well, when I was like 12 and 13, I had a drinking problem, and then I found other things, and I didn't care about drinking anymore, right? So I went a lot of years with not drinking. And so when I started drinking, I was like, I really didn't think that I had a drinking problem. And today, like, if we're getting right down to it, this is something I share often, and like, maybe, like, if there's a scientific definition, maybe I'm not an alcoholic, is what I know now because of 2013, is that if I get too drunk, I'm going to get high. And so I was at the bar that night, went out dancing, and I had ran into my aunt in the bar. I'm from a really small town. I'll let you know that. And I ran into my aunt, and my aunt had been in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous. She's a, what they call a garden variety drunk, but, and this was obviously one of her times when she was out, but I had seen her, and we were both drunk, and we were like, oh, hey, we should go to a meeting tomorrow, ha ha ha, funny jokes, right? And I went about my business, she went about her business. I ended up getting so drunk, I found, old using people, and managed to hang out with them for like probably less than an hour before I got high, right? And I knew on that day, like, I know that if I do drugs, I'm gonna die. Is what I didn't know is that if I drink, I'm gonna do drugs, and then I'm probably gonna die. You know what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you mean.
So that's kind of that. And then I didn't sleep that night, and I remember it was like 4:35 a.m. in my car because my car was parked downtown, and I didn't want to drive drunk, but I might not have been drunk anymore because now I'm high, but I was too afraid. And so I'm sitting there, and of course thinking all the thoughts and like, what? Well, I'm either going to go one way or the other here. And so I drove out to my aunt's, and it was a Sunday morning now. 4/14/2013 was a Sunday, and we have a 10 a.m. meeting on Sundays in my town. And I knocked on my aunt's door, and she opened, hungover as heck, I'm sure. And I'm like, we need to go to a meeting. She was like, what are you talking about? And it's just kind of funny because me and her shared a sobriety date for about a month, and then she got selfish and had to get her own. So,
yeah. So let's backtrack a little bit because I started drinking when I was 11, 12 years old, and I know how those party years go. And a lot of people that I talk to surprisingly don't discover alcohol until their 20s. And to me, that's shocking because it shaped my adolescence was drinking. How did you discover alcohol at such a young age like I did?
Well, it's funny because I can remember being like even young, like a little girl sitting on my dad. Like my grandparents were, specifically my grandpa, but my grandma would have a drink like every night too, if I can remember correctly. But my grandpa was definitely like a very much functioning alcoholic. I don't ever remember him like being mean or like violent, you know what I mean? But he definitely drank every night after work until he went to bed. But my family would sit around the kitchen table, and I can remember being a really little girl, like my dad would let me drink off of his beer, and it was like super cute and funny. Yeah. But then I got to be, I'm gonna say about 11, and my grandparents had the liquor cabinet, and me and my cousins like started to like sneak alcohol. And that was really it, but like that's how it very first started. I wasn't by any means drinking every day at that point, but definitely at 12, is when I started even drinking, not just like with my cousins sneaking it in the bathroom, But like I don't know, I was at a friend's house, I think the first night that I ever really drank like socially, and it was like sour apple puckers or something. And that was it. And I mean, I will say from that point forward, it was like that friend group that I had. Definitely, you know, the wild ones are the ones that your parents didn't want you hanging out with, maybe. Not my parents, but somebody's parents.
You were that person they didn't want you hanging out with.
I was that person.
I know for me, my parents weren't big drinkers at all, but they always threw a party. Like they always knew how to throw a party, and there would be leftover liquor from the party, and they would stash it in the basement. And then my friend and I would sneak into my parents' basement while everyone was asleep, and he was sleeping over, and we would make Captain and Coke.
Oh.
And watch movies and just like drink Captain and Coke and think we're in fifth
grade.
Right. And when I was 12, a friend passed away. He was hit by a car. And I said to that friend, hey, if we drink, we're going to feel better. And that's me drinking like an alcoholic.
Yes.
It was not like I say I was an alcoholic when I was 12, not because I was drinking daily, but I was drinking to numb and forget.
Absolutely.
So to me, that's drinking as an alcoholic at 12 years old. I discovered weed when I was 13, but I didn't get into harder stuff until I was in my early 20s. But just like you said, once I discovered harder stuff, I kind of forgot about alcohol for a while because I drink if I can do this. Why should I drink if I can do pills?
Yeah, I get that. And for me, it was why drink if I can do meth? And I started meth young. I mean, young also, like 13.
I was just going to see what was your next progression from alcohol? Was it meth or was it weed? Or
I think weed and alcohol were like right around the same time. And then so my progression from I categorized those two kind of together. Then my next progression was acid and meth.
Acid at that young of age? Could you even understand acid at that age?
I don't think so. But I was like really, you know, and even before those things, I guess, like I was the kid. I don't know if you've seen that TikTok that went around a while ago. Like, I think it might have been last year, but it was about the Robitussin song. You know, it was that song that was like the fucking Robitussin. And I laughed too hard because I was that kid. Like, we would drink Robitussin to, like, you know, trip out and
trip.
Yeah.
I got into acid when I was 22, and I still think I was too young to appreciate what acid can do for you.
Right. I definitely don't think that I appreciated what I could do.
Like, I appreciated the body high acid gave me when I was 22, but I couldn't appreciate the existentialism that goes on in your head when you take acid. Like, you literally, they say it's a trip because you do go on a little mini vacation away from yourself and look back at yourself like Kermit in the Hoodie. And you go and you realize like a hold of a mirror to yourself and learn a lot about yourself. And even at 22, I think I learned what acid really was when I was like 25.
Yeah.
Like, wow, this is unbelievable. But I can't imagine at 13 me being able to appreciate the existentialism. I can't.
Definitely not.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you discover acid, then how do you get into meth? You know, because you live in the middle of nowhere in Alaska. So is that where you're
I live in a very small town on an island at that.
It's even more remote than just being in Alaska in general. Like,
so it's not like up in the tundra. I live in Southeast Alaska, so I'm actually closer to like Seattle, Washington than I am to most of Alaska. But but nonetheless, I'm still on an island, and you know, the only way to get anything here is to fly it in or boat it in, or of course the mail, which I learned later. But but I, you know, drug actually, and I say. Back then it was crank. It wasn't meth. It wasn't crystal meth yet when I was 13, you know? But I think that was right around the time, at least in my community, when like that transformation from a lot of, I will say my parent, my father, and maybe my older step siblings doing like cocaine into like this biker, you know, crank.
Yeah, the biker crank that's made in a bathtub.
Literally. And you know, I wish I could say I was already like, the party girl. Clearly, I'm doing acid and mushrooms and drinking all the time, and definitely, it was that same kind of group of friends that I had, and in our community, it's probably not just my community, but we knew a lot of, like, I was 13, but hung out with like some people that were like 20. You know what I mean? Or maybe even older, and there might have been like a sibling in between there, or it just never seemed like even super weird. However, I look at my 13-year-old daughter now, and I'm like, if you ever,
No,
so definitely.
We just said that the other day. My wife and I are both sober, and we said that the other day because our kid is 10, and
Yeah.
I said to her, I said it's weird because I was so close to alcohol that I experimented when I was 11. And to think that he's 10 and he is nowhere in a mindset where he would need to escape from alcohol. He loves his video games. He's like a video game nerd. You know what I mean? Like he's all about watching YouTube videos of
Yep.
video games, and that's
Yeah.
all he cares about. When I was 11, it was sports and drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the two things that I was concerned about.
Yeah.
How old are you now?
I am 39.
Okay, so I'm 38, so we're the same age. So I'm just trying
Yes.
to get an idea of what years
Yeah.
you say you were growing up. So this was the late 90s, early 2000s
Yeah.
when you become a teenager and you're learning about old biker crank.
Yeah, and I think really this is, so I went to treatment when I was 13 early. I think I have my memory from all these times is not the greatest, but I typically say that I think I went to treatment 13 for drinking, really. And is what it was is like I was drinking a lot, like every single day, and I was getting wasted. And then like our teachers went on strike that year, and I can remember like me and 2 or 3 of my friends, we would go to the school, check in to see if teachers were back. They weren't, and then we would go like to the baseball field dugout or whatever and drink like a half gallon of peppermint schnapps, which is absolutely disgusting. But it was like a regular thing.
It's
And
sour apple puckers. I can almost taste the puckers from being an early teenager.
I know.
When you like stood outside the liquor store and asked somebody to buy you alcohol, and then they laugh as they buy you puckers that you now have to drink and stuff.
Yes. And so I was, I don't know why it was this time period that was the time period, but like, well, I do know there was a lot of trauma that kind of happened because I was a young girl hanging out with significantly older men, and we were partying, and and so I was sexually assaulted twice the year that I was 12, and so then I definitely was drinking to escape and to just not feel all the things and to wonder, like, is it normal that nobody in my family is like doing anything? Like looking back, I always ask, like, I wonder what would have happened if somebody would have put me in counseling, and not even just my family. I come from an addicted family, everybody in my family, pretty much. But like in the second time that I was sexually assaulted, that ended up becoming like a huge court case, which was traumatizing in and of itself. And there was no court recommendation even that I, participate in counseling, which is so weird to me.
Well, now because counseling and therapy is so a go-to now.
Yes.
Mental health is such a hot button issue. Mental health wasn't a big deal even 10 years ago. I mean,
no.
I was engaged to somebody who was bipolar, schizophrenic.
Oh, you too, huh?
Oh, you were too?
That's a huge part of my story, actually.
Yeah, she took her life in 2015.
My fiance, my middle daughter, my 13-year-old daughter's biological father took his life in 2012.
Holy shit.
So yeah, that's a trip.
Story.
That's crazy. I got chills.
Yeah. July 13th, 2015, and I spiraled big time. I couldn't handle it. And so, as you know, definitely mental health was so stigmatized back then. There wasn't support groups or stuff like that for people who were struggling with being schizophrenic, let alone bipolar. Like I'm bipolar. I just learned about a year and a half ago I was bipolar.
Okay.
it made a lot of sense with everything else that I was dealing with.
Right.
You know, my family, my parents were together until the day my dad died. So it's not
Oh,
like I grew up in a broken home or anything like that. Just that my wiring was off, that I felt like I
yeah.
had to drink and escape all the time at such a young age.
Yeah.
So that's now you're 13 years old. You just go through that big court case, and you're still drinking.
Yeah. And I had gone to and it's interesting because I lived with my parents were divorced, and at this time I was living with my dad, and my mom had, I think, 9 years in recovery at this point. And one day I went to her and I told her, I said, Mom, I think I need to go to treatment. And she told my grandma, and they made it happen. And I was, like now that today I know that like the window of opportunity thing is very real. At 13, I didn't know. I knew that I said I wanted help, and then when they got me the help, I was so angry. But I went down to Washington State, went to treatment. It was just like a 28-day program. And I knew, like, and then I didn't want to leave, right? I was pissed that they actually sent me there, and then I didn't want to leave because every friend that I had used or partied or, was getting arrested or fighting, or, we were definitely, like I said, we were the kids that, the good kids his parents didn't want their kids around. And growing up in the family that I grew up in, and I really love my family. My dad is still out there in active addiction, and he is one of my best friends. I don't hold a lot of blame or anything at my family. I believe that we were all doing the best we could with what we had, but I knew that the odds of me being able to stay sober, because I didn't know how I would go home and like make all new friends, because I felt I had alienated myself enough to where like I wasn't part of like the good kids or the athletic kids anymore. You know what I mean? And I was this kid.
How was rehab at 13 years old though? Because like I went to rehab when I was 31. I can't imagine a 13-year-old scared girl, because I would imagine you would have been scared in a new state. And
Yeah.
it's the first time you've been in the continental states.
Well, I mean, we used to go on like vacations and stuff, but like to be there without family, you know what I mean? It was scary. And I will say that's where my mind, I didn't know really about meth. Like I knew my dad did cocaine, but my dad was an IV drug user, and at that point that was not my story, and I didn't think I was ever going to do that, you know what I mean? But that's where I started hearing about like meth and heroin for the first time, was in treatment actually. And so I think it was within, I would say, probably a week of when I got out of that treatment center and back home. It might have been a little bit more, but it was very close to when I got home. I remember I got home, I was frying on acid, I got a minor consuming within 24, which is, I don't know what that's called where you are, but I got arrested for being too young to drink within 24 hours of getting back home from treatment. And I feel like it was like within a week that one of my friends asked me if I wanted to try meth, and it was like, now I was curious because,
you just don't know about it in rehab.
Yeah, and so I was just like, yeah, let's do it, and we did it.
And you found the drug you've been looking for, the match made in heaven with meth.
And that is exactly, I can, and sometimes I hate it when things are so cliche, but like it was literally, that was the high that I was always chasing, even though, in my years after that, I've been a lot more high than I was that day. But it was that feeling in that moment. I remember like I was under this building, we were walking through a parking lot, and I like stepped off of a cement parking, like at the head-in parking thing. And I was like, I feel like Superman. And then I remember laughing because I'm a female. I'm like, how you can't be Superman. But in my mind, I felt like I had never felt like that before. And it was like, the euphoria. I was happy. All the trauma that I'd experienced to that point, it like didn't exist. And
it was that aha moment. That's what I call the aha moment, because like mine was, I had stopped caring about alcohol. Like 21, I went really hard. I went really hard from 11 to 21 with drinking. And 21, I specifically went hard because now I can legally drink. So I was going to all the bars and spending an enormous amount of money going to bars all the time. And then by the time I was going to be 22, alcohol just wasn't fun anymore. like I had gotten my own apartment when I was 20. I was the first one out of my friends to have their own place. So my apartment was like party central, always
Yeah.
big parties, always got really drunk. And by 22, that shit just wasn't fun anymore. And so like I was experimenting with things. I did acid a few times. I did mushrooms a few times. I hated mushrooms. I knew that. I hated the way they tasted. It wasn't worth it. It just wasn't worth it for me. I tried ecstasy a couple times, and that was acid. I loved acid, but the problem was I needed the day off the next day to do acid. It wasn't possible to do acid every day.
Yeah.
And then a few weeks later, I discovered opiates. I discovered Percocet 10s, and those
Yeah.
2 Perc 10s set me on a flight that I knew. I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is that daily thing that I can take. So I know exactly what that feeling. I remember sitting in my recliner, nobody home. It was just me in my apartment watching baseball, and I had arrived. This is what so now you're 13 and you discover meth. Like, how did you start acquiring it at such a young age, like money wise?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would, I could ask my dad for money. I think, my dad, we lived in a pretty small apartment. I think my dad might have been getting, well, that year he had gotten a DUI, so I don't even know if he was working around that time, but he was probably dealing drugs or something. I could ask him for money, or this is how I have vivid memories of me and a couple of my girlfriends, and then like the 3 guy friends that we hung out with the most. Would go downtown, and mind you, I'm from Southeast Alaska. It's a fishing, logging community, and especially back then, fishing was still making people a lot of money back then. And so this must have been like right around springtime going into summertime. And we would be out late, after midnight for sure. And all the drunk fishermen would be like coming out of the bars or even coming off the boats that are parked right there at the dock. And they literally would have like thousands and thousands of dollars of cash in their pockets, wasted. It seemed like they were just throwing money around, but we would just ask people for money and they would give it to us. And so that's really how it was at first.
That's pretty wild. But I guess in such like a remote area, like it's all you can really do is drink and do drugs.
And back then, I mean, there used to be a joke like there was more bars than churches here. That's probably not. They're maybe about even now. But back then, a few of them have shut down. In fact, and my grandma owned a bar until I was like 20 years old, and so I grew up in downtown in the bar. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly. There was definitely more bars than churches in the town I grew up in too. I grew up in a 1 square mile town.
Wow.
So, but we had like 10,000 people in our 1 square mile town. We were just really congested. And we grew up, it was a 10-minute ride from where I lived into Philadelphia.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So like our town was right by the bridge that takes you over to Philly. So, we were close to a city, but it felt like forever away in a 1 square mile town where you could walk everywhere and, ride your bike anywhere. Which I never learned how to ride a bike, so I didn't ride my bike anywhere. So you're a teenager. How is school going with, going to treatment, you're drinking, now you're smoking meth or you're snorting?
Yeah, I was smoking meth at that time. And so school was going, I was good. I made it through elementary school and I loved school. Got to 7th grade. It was the summer after 7th grade when I really started like drinking socially. So 8th grade was pretty rough. I missed more days than I actually attended that year. And I didn't meet the requirements to like not graduate, but continue on to high school. And so I had to do part of my 8th grade year over again. So I went to the alternative high school because they had the 7th and 8th grade area and then the high school. And so it only took me a couple months to finish that. But then it was at the beginning of my 9th grade year that things really like when 8th grade was rough. I didn't care about school anymore. I didn't want to be there, and now I'm living back with my dad. Like, I was raised by my dad, but in my mom's period of being sober, she came home, and I lived with her, I think, from 4th grade to 7th grade, maybe, because she was sober and she was doing the right thing, right? My dad was still actively using, and but I was so resentful at her. It just didn't make sense. Like, I didn't really grow up. I knew who my mom was, but my dad raised me. And really, my memories of my mom as a young child, my really young memories of my mom I know only exist because I had seen pictures. You know what I mean? And so I didn't care about anything, and my dad was busy, tending to his drinking, and he worked out at camps. He was a heavy equipment operator, and so, I didn't really have any rules, and I was allowed to do whatever I want, and so school tended to not be one of those things. And then at 15, I got pregnant, and then I ended up dropping out of school.
Now, who got you pregnant? I know, like somebody in your school.
So he was my boyfriend. I don't feel he didn't really go to school. He did for a little bit, but then he had dropped out already before me. He was my off and on again boyfriend, like from I think 12 to 22. We got divorced. We had gotten married at some point. But I was 15, he was 16, and he was not in school. He had moved here actually with his sister, and then his sister went to prison, and his mom left him here, and so he ended up living with my family. And so anyway, yeah, I got pregnant, and by the time I found out I was pregnant, we were actually broken up. And he did not want me to have my daughter, and I wasn't going to have my daughter. I had plans. I had the ticket and the plans to go down to Washington to terminate the pregnancy, and then the day of, I got scared and I couldn't do it. And so,
you have a 24-year-old?
Huh?
Do you have a 24-year-old?
I do. Well, she'll be 23. I turned 16 by the time I had her. So I was 16, and then 3 months later, I had her. But yeah, she'll be 23 actually in like 2 weeks.
So you had to grow up fast then?
Yes.
And you had to learn how to be a mom when you never really had a mom to like show you the way.
Correct. And by the time that I had gotten pregnant, my mom had relapsed, and so now she's smoking crack and drinking. And I had to, when I went in to go be induced with my daughter, I had to call my mom and literally tell her, like, if you are not here, you will never see your granddaughter. And I vaguely remember, because I was so, being barely 16 and having a baby, that's a whole experience in and of itself, but my mom did show up, and I won't ever forget that. She was not okay, but she was there.
Yeah, I can't imagine, because like I'm a stepdad, so I can't imagine going through that at any point, let alone at 16 years old. Yeah. With your parents the way that they were. Are you an only child?
Well, I was an only child. I do have two. Well, I actually think I have 3 little brothers. One I don't know. My baby brother, who is, very much part of my family, is my dad's child. And my dad was never really in a relationship with my brother's mom. It was just a one night stand, or maybe a couple night stand. I don't know, but but my little baby brother is 2 years older than my daughter.
Uncle at a young age.
And in fact, later in my story, our parents, my dad and his mom were in prison. And so him and his brother lived with me, and he was like a child, really, to me for a few years.
Yeah. So you obviously got sober to be pregnant.
Yeah. So I didn't find out I was pregnant until I was like, probably right about 3 months. And even then, I didn't think that I was going to have her. So I didn't stop drinking and drugging right away. But once I knew that I was going to keep her, I did manage to get sober. And I did that, kind of like on my own. I just stayed at my grandparents' house, and hung out on the couch. I wasn't going to school anymore, so I got really fat, which for a girl my age, that was really hard for me. But I did manage to stay sober. I gave birth to her completely sober. I did end up using again when she was she was born in September, and it might have been Halloween. I think I started using again.
I was born in September too. 29th. I was waiting for you to say 29 too, just because.
No, that would be real weird, right? No, her birthday is September 4th.
Oh, okay. All right. So now we're caught up. It's Halloween, and you're now a mother, and you're 16, and you have gone 6 months abstinent from drugs and alcohol, and it's Halloween, so it's already a big party night. Yeah. And you figured I have a babysitter, and I'm going to get fucked up.
And I have no idea who was babysitting. That's crazy, right? I can't remember that, but I know. I have no idea. I literally have no idea. But I did. I went out with my friends and got drunk, and then I have vague memories of being drunk and smoking meth in somebody's bathroom. I don't know for sure exactly where I was, but and even then I wasn't back to using like every day like I used to. I ended up moving to Nevada to go be near my daughter's father. And in Nevada, I didn't do drugs or drink. We were young, and he worked at Pizza Hut. I worked at Safeway. That was when I had my very first apartment. It was like right behind the Safeway, and it was like a decent apartment. Back then things were a lot less expensive. Yep. So like 2 young children with no education working minimum wage jobs, I knew we didn't have money per se, but I never felt like we were poor. Yeah. Which I think I feel like I'm more poor now. I have my shit together than I ever did back then. And I don't think I was down there. I don't know exactly how long I was down there. My mom drove down with me, and so my mom was sober for a little while. But she ended up getting married to some guy that she met at a meeting. And, in Reno, you can get married, like walk in and you're married. And then she took off. She had relapsed and ended up over in Jacksonville, Florida, doing all the things. But at some point, I ended up going back to Alaska. I think my grandfather was sick. And so I went home, and when I went home, I was partying, and I think I cheated on my daughter's dad while I was home, and then found out when I got back down to Nevada that he also had cheated on me. And then I was going to go to Job Corps. That's what it was. I came back to Alaska to go to Job Corps, so I don't think I came straight back to Ketchikan. I went to Anchorage, where my dad was in prison. And my little brother's mom had just gotten out of like a really long-term treatment program. And so she had been sober, I think, a couple years, and she had offered to let me live at her house. So I did that. I went to Anchorage. I didn't end up going to Job Corps, so I don't really know what the heck I did. But then my daughter's dad ended up coming eventually. And he ended up joining the National Guard, I think, when I was, I don't know, 18. And there's a lot of like back and forth. I did like the whole relocation, trying to run away from myself, but I
did that too. I lived in 5 different states.
Yeah, that's about.
I moved 30 times during my addiction, literally 30 times. And I would never spend more than a few months in the same place.
Yeah.
Never got evicted. I mean, I technically got evicted from a bunch of places, but I was always on the move, so I didn't care. Nothing was ever really in my name. I was basically homeless in the sense that I was constantly sleeping on the couch or sleeping in a basement, sleeping in an attic. Wherever someone would let me stay, I was staying. And it didn't matter to me. Oh, you have a room? Cool. I can sleep in that room then. And I bounced around for 13 years of my addiction, from 20 to like 32 or 19 to 30, something like that. But I just kept moving away from myself. When my fiance died, I went to North Carolina from Jersey. I left on a Thursday. She was supposed to come with me in August, like the following month. And I moved on a Thursday, Friday, and then by Sunday she did that.
Was it a Sunday? Was it Sunday that she died?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that is literally so crazy. Chad died on a Sunday also.
Yes, they found her Monday. She did it on a Sunday night, and what's really, I don't talk about it too often. At like we weren't talking for a couple of days because I left.
Yeah.
And she was really into music, and one of her favorite songs was "Losing My Religion" by REM. I heard it 3 different times in an hour in the middle of the night while watching TV and like listening to music on Pandora. I heard it 3 different times. So I texted her at 6 a.m, like, "Hey, I've been thinking of you. Let's just talk this out, blah, blah, blah." And then she never got my text. And to me, that was her way of saying goodbye, was that playing over and over again was the reminder of she's not here anymore.
Right.
It was July 13th of 2015. And when her mom called me to tell me what happened, I said to my brother, who was driving at the time, we were in his car together, so take me to the liquor store. I need to get a bottle of Jack.
Yeah.
So he took me right to the liquor store, and I got a bottle, and I drank my sorrows away. I wasn't at her funeral because her parents didn't want me there. They kind of blamed me.
I get it.
I was a drug addict. So I was a negative influence. And so, like, people, her friends, were mad at me for not going. But it's like, you guys haven't even been around for these last 3 years while she was sick.
Right.
You guys walked away from her because you couldn't handle being in a friendship with somebody who was schizophrenic. You didn't know how to, quote, handle her. And I stuck around till the very end. Like, don't come at me.
Right.
And you don't know what it's like to be with somebody who's schizophrenic and goes through manic episodes and starts hitting you. And you have to, like, I got really good at catching wrists and bringing them together, because she would wake up in the middle of the night hitting me saying, "Who's paying you to be with me? I know they're after you, and I know that they're paying you off to be with me." And just have episodes. And that was, her name was Colleen, and that was, it's been 9 years now, but it's one of those things where my wife is so I've talked to her as recent as like a year ago, but it's not easy. When did you meet him?
So I met Chad when, so I'm just trying to think. I had left my husband. So like I said, my husband had joined the National Guard. My ex-husband now, obviously, but and I left him in February of 2008 and moved back to my hometown here in Ketchikan. And I had already started relapsing. I have ADHD that I wasn't diagnosed with until I was in my 20s, or I think I was 20. And when I first started taking medication, it was actually after a suicide attempt of my own. And I took it normal for the first year and a half or whatever. But then me and my ex-husband were going through it. There was lots of physical abuse going on. And, a part of my story is that I ended up working in a brothel and the strip club in Nevada. And then we were up at Fort Greely, and we had this good life, right? Like, I was sober, like actually sober. He was in the National Guard. We had like this 3-story house. We both had brand new cars. I made $21 an hour at 20 years old, which was a lot of money back then, and we had a good life, and I had just had another kid. And anyway, things were crazy. So I had been prescribed Adderall, and during all this, as our relationship spiraled out of control, like, we had been off and on again for the 10 years we were together, but this time I knew that we were like heading towards like, it's really going to be over, right? And so I had started using my Adderall inappropriately, and at first I was just like popping Adderall, and like extra ones, and then I started snorting them, and meth is my drug of choice. So I wanted to be high because then I don't have to deal with what's going on. And sorry, that was my daughter. She just walked by. But so I moved back to Ketchikan. My mom came and helped me pack up. I drove through Canada back home with I had my daughter, and then I had a son when I was 20. And so I had the 2 kids. And I met Chad so I got back to Ketchikan. I got a job immediately. I got a cute little apartment. And I started going out to the bar, drinking. And then one night I used, and I really thought that I could just use meth on the weekends. Like, I really believed that. It was like, I think I started my job mid-May. By June 12th, which I remember the date because that's my aunt's birthday, and my birthday is 5 days later.
That's also the day my dad died.
Oh, gosh.
And it's also the day my best friend died.
Oh, my gosh. Goodness gracious.
June 12th, 2012, and then June 12th, 2023.
Oh, my gosh. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So I had, like I said, I was convinced I could just use meth on the weekends, and in a month, I had lost my job and I was no longer paying my bills. I had stolen, went into my grandma's office, wrote a $2,000 check, trying to catch up the rent, all the things. And I was dealing meth now. And somewhere in this process, that's when I had met Chad. And so he was also, addicted to drugs. And we were hanging out and ended up together. I did end up going back to my kids' dad at one point. Very briefly, and he, beat the shit out of me. I brought drugs back to Alaska to sell. Went back to Washington. He came up to bring drugs. Chad came down, and we stole his truck and left. And and me and Chad were. It's crazy when I think about it because we were together only for 4 years, and now he's been dead for almost 12 years. And I remember the day. It was years back now, but that I realized he's now been dead longer than I even knew. I've been having to remember him longer than I even knew him. And that is a trip. Yeah. Such a trip. Our relationship was wild. I was addicted to drugs. I was the first person that, introduced him to IV drug use. And, he definitely was already an addict, but I was using a different way. And, so I definitely feel I have my guilt around that. I've worked through a lot of that, but
and this is technically your second relationship ever. You know what I mean? You're in your 20s and you've only ever been really with one guy, and I say that relationship wise.
Yeah.
And because it was off and on from when you were 12. So you're not really dating in between those off and ons.
Right.
It's a bunch of one-nighters.
Exactly. Yeah, and my as far as serious relationships go,
yeah. So this is the first person that you met that wasn't from your small town in your life.
He actually was from my small town. I was back in Kent, but I didn't know him when I was growing up.
Was he older?
Yeah. So he was not a whole lot older than just 3 years older than me, but he didn't grow up here. They moved here a little. I don't know exactly at what point, but and I had been, I relocated so many times that during the times in my life where I would have ended up meeting him, probably when he was 18 or whatever, I would be gone, But yeah, no, I mean, we had instantly we had a huge connection, but instantly it was also volatile. We're using drugs. There's nothing healthy about that. We're shooting meth. There's nothing healthy about that. That can make even a sound-minded person go crazy, myself included. And then with Chad's bipolar, well, he was diagnosed during the course of our relationship. He didn't know. And they were working on either schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder diagnosis, but we are meth addicts and they cannot, by law, they cannot diagnose somebody with that if they're not sober, because how do you tell what the delusions are from? I knew because Chad was very open and honest with me, more so than he ever was, with his family. But he had told me that he started hearing voices when he was 15 years old and he never did drugs until he was 18. And so I know we knew, but we couldn't stay sober long enough for him to get properly diagnosed. So he was never on any medication targeted directly at the schizophrenia.
Which is, it's hard enough to get a schizophrenic person diagnosed. It's even
Mm-hmm.
harder to get the right kind of medications,
Yeah.
let alone if you're bipolar, get the right medications. A lot of
Yeah,
it,
that was.
a lot of it's trial and error. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because like bipolar is such a spectrum of different things that your doctor, psychiatrist is like, well, we're gonna give you this to see how you react to it. And then if it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work, we'll have you come off of it for 2 months and then we'll start you on something else. But we won't know
Mm-hmm.
if it's working for 2 months. So you have to take it for 2 months and then we'll
Yeah.
see if there's a difference. And then 2 months later, we'll get you off of that and start it with something new. It's a
Yeah.
lot of trial and error when just bipolar, let alone schizophrenia, is a
Yeah.
whole other beast. And if you're unmedicated, you do exactly what Colleen and Chad did, both C names.
Yeah.
Um, and that you take your own life because you can't handle it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly ultimately what happened. Like I said, he had come down to Washington to get me and the kids. We took off. We lived in Washington for about a year. In that process, we had gotten OCS involved. My mom called OCS on me. I think down in Washington it's CPS, Child Protective Services. And rightfully so, I was mad at my mom for about 24 hours, and then I came to reality. Yeah, she's probably terrified because I was dealing drugs, and we had brought drugs back up to Alaska, and at some point, I don't know, the people that we were dealing drugs with, which I'm still pretty careful about, it was a big deal, scary people. They had called my poor grandmother and said, where's Christine? Anyway, and threatened to slit my throat, and then they didn't know where I was, and so my mom was right to call OCS, really. That's what I would do today,
Yeah.
And anyway,
I have a question.
Yeah.
I've been to Canada a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
How did you traffic drugs between Alaska to? It's not like you can cut a corner and go from Alaska and stay in the country the entire time. How are you getting into Washington and then back to Alaska while also having drugs with you?
Well, so this particular time, it was around Thanksgiving that year that we were going up. We were going to be taking the ferry, and we would have been Bellingham. So you can take the ferry straight from Bellingham, Washington, to where I live. You do end up going into Canadian territory. But funny story. So we were running late because that's what people high on meth do, right? They 5 minutes. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Yeah. We were running late, almost missed the ferry. When we get there, literally the drug dog is there, and they tell us to step away from my kids, the bags, everything. They sniff all around. They go about their business, and we're trying to figure out how the fuck did that just happen. Well, we get on the ferry and realize that we had fucking left the drugs in the truck. Oh my God. And at the last minute, my damn dog, my dad was in jail. I had his dog. And Rita, that was her name, she would not get in the kennel, and I had to leave her in the truck also because we were going to miss this damn ferry. And I'm on the phone telling someone that they need to come get the dog. Well, that phone call ended up being, I need you to come get the dog and the drugs and then get them to Alaska. They were supposed to fly up the next day. I never seen the drugs or the dog ever again, which it's heartbreaking about the dog. I loved her, and that was my dad's best friend, and you know what I mean? And then so we just called our person, and he had somebody else fly the drugs up, the next day or whatever, different drugs. So now we all, I've done a lot, I dealt drugs the majority of my story, at least from 17 to 27, and the airplane and the mail, and that's really it. So I never got caught. I will say a lot of people didn't get caught dealing drugs that I was dealing, and I to this day don't know how I never got in trouble, because I should have, and there were times I thought I was going to. And in fact, I did hear that, and I don't know if this is ever true, I never went and asked the police. Well, I kind of did, not in so many words, but when Chad died, I did hear that somebody had actually wore a wire on him, not me, and it was a female. So I don't know if there was something else going on there or what, but And that was all right around the time that he died. But yeah, so I mean that's it, the airplane and the mail.
I used to do the mail too. I would get when I was living in North Carolina, I couldn't be near. I wasn't near pills. At least people that I knew that had pills.
Right.
So I was around alcohol, which is I drank myself stupid for a year. And then once a month I treated myself. I would Western Union money up to Jersey.
Yeah.
And one of my friends would go buy pills with the money I sent him. I would give him some as a thank you. And then he would go to the post office and send me like a notebook and have it in special paper so that when it couldn't be detected by mail.
Yeah.
I'm blanking on the paper, what it's called. And then he would overnight me mail. And then I'd be sitting waiting for the mailman to show up the next day with my overnight package so that I can go get high right away.
Yeah.
Being at the bar every day, I find cocaine easily. So I started doing coke all the time too because I was snorting anything. I didn't care what it was. I was just snorting drugs. So how did you take? I know how I took it when Colleen passed, and I was drinking and using. How did you take it when Chad passed?
You know, it's actually so crazy because well, Chad died November 18th, 2012, and my sober date is 4/14/2013. And is what I will. So I'm gonna backtrack to Chad died November. Somebody very close in my family, and I feel so awkward saying that because if I was having a conversation with you like in person, I would tell you exactly. But I had somebody very close to me in my life who overdosed and died, and then 6 weeks later Chad died, and this person was pretty much I mean they were family, and I'm careful out of respect for their family. Their family has never publicly said what happened, even though I think everybody knows, but so I just try to be a little bit careful. But that impacted my life. That first loss fucked me up. And of course I couldn't do anything but keep using because I would like cry and cry and cry, and then as soon as I would get loaded I would stop crying, you know, right? And so then 6 weeks later when Chad died, and that night it was crazy. It's always crazy, right? I mean, never like I'm from the trailer park. I still live in the trailer park. I still live in the same house that Chad died in, which is crazy. And you know, I am the one that found Chad. He hung himself in our garage, and I found him. I mean, within minutes. Like he had not been dead very long, and my higher power was on my side that night. And I hate to say that because obviously, like, I heard the noise, and now in hindsight, I know what happened. That night, I didn't know what happened. I just thought he was fucking tweaking out in the garage being weird. But in that very moment, when I heard that loud noise, our daughter spilled the whole soda on my bed. And for whatever reason, I decided that I needed to clean it up. I needed to change the sheets before I went to figure out what the hell my tweaker fiance was doing. And you know, that night, obviously, I lost my mind that night, and we didn't have a working phone in this house. And I was screaming out in the middle of the trailer park, like, for somebody to help, and no one's coming, probably because me and him would fight like psychopaths, you know, in the middle of the trailer park, and people are like, just probably thinking we're fighting. And I guess I ended up having to like kick in the door of a friend of ours that lives like 4 doors down, or did. I don't even have any recollection that that's what happened, but he has told me that that's what happened. And of course that night it messed me up, big time. And even immediately after, you know, there's a lot that I don't remember. I will say that, you know, my brain, when I think about it for too long or whatever, like, and I've had a few moments since then where like, I remember things that I had kind of forgotten, but my brain protected me pretty well, if I'm being honest, as far as like remembering the details of that night and what I seen and how that really was.
You had a kid with him too?
Huh?
Do you have a kid with him?
I do. So my middle daughter, she was not quite 2 when he died. And, at that point we had been together for 4 years. My older 2 children's dad was not in the picture. And I mean, they considered Chad their dad. My oldest son, I have 5 children now, but my oldest son, it messed him. I mean, it literally, watching him was so devastating for me. And I still think I haven't probably fully processed it. And that's just me being completely real. But watching him, like, he was in first grade, and, after that moment happened, like, he stopped doing his work. He wouldn't talk. He literally was in the principal's office probably every day from 2nd grade to 6th grade. And it was only because we had a wonderful school counselor that I think that we even made it through elementary school. It messed him up so bad. His biological daughter, Chad's daughter, Addie, she's my middle child. She doesn't remember him except in pictures. And then sometimes I feel real guilty because I feel like I have robbed my daughter of, knowing how much, like, her dad loved her so much. And it was just too hard. It was too painful for too long for me to even really talk about him or have his pictures up. The night that he died, he wrote something on a block on a piece of plywood in the garage. My dad cut that out and into the shape of a heart, and it's in my, my daughter has it in all of her pictures, but they're in a drawer in her room because I don't know, more recently I've been able to talk about him a little bit, and we do a big event in our community now that I helped co-found. It's called Stomp the Stigma, and part of that is like a gone but not forgotten. And we have posters of everybody that we have lost, or at least not even close to everybody, but everybody that we've been given permission to put their face on a poster. And so my daughter's been carrying that poster for 6 years now. And I think, she's getting older now and probably has questions, and she cries sometimes. I'm sure, I don't know what it's like to wonder what happened to your dad. You know what I mean? I still have my dad, even though I imagine, my dad, like I said, my dad's still in active addiction, but I don't know what it's like to be raised by another man that is a wonderful father to her, but she also does still have this dad, that she doesn't know.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's what I was gonna. So my family came and got us that night, obviously took us out of the house after the police and coroner and all the things left. And I wanted to come back home the next day, and my family was like, what the heck? And part of it was because I had meth in my bra that I couldn't use at my mom's house, and I wanted to use. But when my mom and my aunt dropped me back off at my house, and this is so crazy, even now thinking about it, hold on, buddy. They were telling me, like, look at what this life is doing to you. Like, literally, it doesn't get any worse than this unless it's going to be you, you can't keep living like this. And that day, and I was able to look at my mom and my aunt in complete honesty and all sincerity. And I said, I know that I am, your face is so dirty. I know that I am not okay. Can you let me finish? I'll be done in just a bit. I know. Here. I know that I'm not okay right now, and I know that you're not going to believe me, but I am going to be okay. And I don't know how I knew that. I do not know. But, I hate that Chad had to die for me to get sober. I absolutely hate that. I know that if he wouldn't have, we would have never been able to get sober together. We had kind of tried and had been briefly sober in our history. But I don't know. I think it was losing that first person, 6 weeks later, losing Chad. And I was still dealing drugs and using drugs. And I think I knew that I was either about to go to prison for a really long time or I was literally going to die. And now I have 3 children. At that time, I had 3 children that now don't have their father figure. And their mom's going to end up gone too. And then what? And that, I mean, like I said, I tried so hard to go to treatment. So hard. But I had 3 children, and my oldest daughter was 12 at the time. And she was too old to go to any program that a mom can bring their children to. And I wasn't willing to leave her behind after what we had just gone through. And so I don't even know how I was able to get myself off the IV drugs, except for I was replacing it with alcohol. That's what I need you to give me some space. Go see Dad for 1 second.
Yeah, I mean, coming off of, so that's when you quit doing meth, and then like you said, you went into drinking for a couple months before you decided that you had enough. Because as soon as you started drinking harder again, you found yourself shooting meth again.
Yeah.
So, and I know you don't have a ton of time. We've spent most of this with war stories. How,
No.
how do you stay sober? Do you still go to meetings
I do.
and you're active?
One thing. Tell me something really fast. I don't think so. Ask your dad. Okay. So no, and this is always, it's funny because we did get into like the whole, bits and pieces of the whole thing, but and of course it's good to share like how we got to where, but always talking about the solution is my, the most important thing to me because that's really what matters. But yeah, I got sober going to meetings. By the time I got sober, my mom was in recovery again. My mom has actually just on August 19th, my mom had 22 years sober. And my stepdad, I think, has 25 years sober. So I knew, and like I said, my mom did have that 9 years sober in my early, when I was a kid, early teenager. And so I knew where I needed to go when I needed to go there, but I still was hesitant. I didn't want to go hang out with all the old people and have no life. And you know what I mean? Like that was a really real fear for me. But at this point, my fear of dying and not being a good mom, and not that I was able to be a good mom from beside the other side of the bathroom door, but I just knew. And so I went to that meeting. It's at 1736 Tongass, and I've gone over the 11 years. There have been there's been times that I haven't gone to a meeting for a whole year. You know what I mean? Because I got sober and I got this beautiful life, and I've had 2 more children, and life is chaotic, and I'm married again, and I've been in this relationship actually for about 10 years, so about a year after Chad died. And I actually, just like any good addict or alcoholic does, all the things to still not, I might have gotten sober, but at like a year I started hanging out with my husband Cody when he came back to town, and he was still shooting dope, and I still wasn't quite sure that I was able, I was living vicariously, I guess, through him. That wild lifestyle is hard to get past.
And then you can be like, fix them.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I saw that little bit of good, and I wanted to fix him, and I went to jail at 1 year sober. Went to jail on a Class B felony at 1 year sober.
You never got caught in addiction.
No, but at 1 year sober, I got caught. I wasn't caught for drugs, but that was again another like 2x4 moment. I needed some intervention from somebody outside of myself because I was about to relapse. I was actually trying to relapse, and my dad and Cody wouldn't use with me, and so it was real close. And then I got in trouble for interfering with official proceedings, so I got in trouble for beating up an informant, I guess is what happened. But it sucks because I didn't actually know that that's what I mean. Okay, I had heard that she was wearing a wire, but I wasn't fighting with her because she was wearing, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But at the end of the day, I have to own my shit, and I was in a house where I knew Cody went to beat up her boyfriend, and I should have never been there. As a person with a year sober that has 3 children at home, I had no business being there, and I was, and so that moment, got me back on the right track, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. And in that moment, Cody and I had only been together for a couple months at that time, and I remember telling him when we got out, like, you don't have to get sober, and I don't expect you to. Like, we're barely, as what I do know is I can't have none of this stuff going on around my life or my children anymore. And he ended up quitting the hard drugs, and he started drinking, and the last 10 years of our relationship has been crazy with his, I remember telling him at the very beginning, one day your drinking is going to become an issue and we're going to have to deal with it. Well, a couple years later, it was an issue, and we've been dealing with it for a long time, but he actually has almost 11 months sober now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It takes what it takes sometimes.
And I say that all the time. But yeah, so I still go to meetings. I love meetings, and I know that they're not for everybody. I am 1000% passionate. I'm completely abstinent. I don't, but my husband still smokes pot, and that's his own stuff, and I'm
My
not
wife,
there to,
my wife
yeah,
still.
and I'm not there to judge if that is what,
Yeah.
it's a lot better. And one day, if him and his sponsor and his higher power decide to work through that, fine. If not, then, is what I really needed was for him to stop drinking. And
Yeah.
like I said, I support all forms of recovery. I don't care how someone does it. If you're able to get your life on track and be a good mom, not put needles in your arms and not die, then I'm gonna support you. I
Yeah.
just know that for me, the 12 steps worked, and they have continued to work through every problem in my life, whether it has been food or infidelity or whatever issues that I fucking create in my own life. Because that's just it. Drugs and alcohol were the solution to the problem that is me.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Well,
Um,
we're killing it.
well, thank you. It hasn't been easy, but right, that's life on life's terms sometimes. But I can tell you that there hasn't been one day in the last 11 plus years that I've said, you know what? I wish I never would have went to that fucking meeting on 4/14/2013. That's just not it. And I've been able to do some really, really cool things that, a girl from the trailer park like me shouldn't have been able to do. That wasn't supposed to be my story. But like I said, me and my best friend co-founded a awesome event that has really turned into a big thing. We do it in September, National Recovery Month every year, and it's really gotten a lot bigger. And
What's it
one
called?
year we had,
What's it called?
it's called Stomp the Stigma. And actually, if you get bored some night, if you YouTube like KPU, so it's Ketchikan Public Utilities, but you can put KPU, Alaska Stomp the Stigma, it will pull up some videos about it.
Yeah, you can send me the link too, and I can put it
I
in.
will.
I can put
Yes,
it
I will definitely
in
do
this
that.
episode.
Oh, that would be really cool.
Um,
So that, I've been to Washington, D.C. I've participated in some, like, I don't know if you know what CADCA is, but it's Communities Against Drugs of America or something like that. It's like big conferences, because I'm on a couple task forces. The craziest thing that has happened is just recently. Well, for one, a full circle moment was a year ago. I got hired at OCS, which is the Office of Children's Services. And, being that that's part of my story, like, that's not really supposed to happen, and, really I had a barrier because of my own history, but I was able to work there. And prior to that, I worked as a counselor in a treatment center. That's my favorite job I've ever had. It was so rewarding. But I just got so we're getting a new treatment center here like any day now. And I got offered to a job to be the program manager of the whole thing, which I feel incredibly unqualified for, but I'm trusting that my higher power knows something that I don't. And it's a pure, like, the whole organization that has grown like crazy in just 5 years. They're based out of up north Alaska, but they're peer centered, peer focused. And so, well, obviously they have high level clinicians. Like, the first time that I've ever really seen it happen this way, at least in Alaska, like, the peer person, the person with lived experience, has just as much value and say as, the person with a clinical degree. And I mean, they can't make decisions about us without us, and and I'm so excited. Our community is hurting. We have lost so many people, as has the rest of the world, but we're on a small island. You can't know somebody without knowing, even if you don't know the person directly, you know the people that they love. And over the last, it's been going on for a long time. I would say like 10 years, but of course, as fentanyl becomes more and more,
I went to a treatment center like that where it was peer based, and even to the point where one of the therapists was in recovery as well. And it was so rewarding to go to somewhere like that and learn from people who have been there in my shoes. I remember being 3 days sober, and I was sitting in rehab 3,000 miles. I went to rehab in California, 3,000 miles from home.
Wow.
Nobody I knew was in California. Everyone went to Florida for rehab. And I wanted to go to California instead. So I get there in Los Angeles, and I'm like 3 days sober now, and I'm sitting at the table, and I'm saying to the one guy who worked there, like his name's Big Mike, and I was like, I don't know if this is gonna work. I've talked to everybody in here, and everybody's on their fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh time in rehab. What's the point of me even being here? Because I'm gonna relapse like everybody else does. And he was like, "Are you gonna be here at the end of July?" And I was like, I don't know. I guess so, maybe. He said, "Well, if you're here at the end of July, you'll be able to give me a 10-year cake." And I've only been to rehab one time, so I'm proof that in 10 years of being
Yes.
one. And I remember this conversation like it just happened yesterday. And he was like, I only needed one rehab to get my life straight, and I was 32 years old, just like you are. He's like, if I can do it, you can do it. And I was like, okay. And that's all like I needed. I ended up giving him his 10-year cake.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
So like I was there. He took me to meetings. He took me to a big conference, an NA conference. Because I went to NA and I went to AA. I had an AA sponsor. I went through the steps in AA. I ended up having a relapse when my dad died, and so now I'm in NA primarily because I went through the steps differently. Because I went through the steps already through AA, so I want to do them differently this time.
Yeah, and the NA steps are very thorough.
You're not kidding. I got my workbook, and it is a lot of questions.
It is so many, but I don't know if you've met, like, I'm actually working the steps right now with my sponsor, who isn't my AA sponsor, but she's so cool, and like we're always getting creative. We've done a lot of things, but we're reading through the CA, Cocaine Anonymous. They're out of the big book, but they also do have a step working guide, and so it's like the best of both worlds. I love the AA big book. Granted, the language in the NA book is definitely a little bit more, but that's kind of where the CA crosses, like reading through it, and then referencing the Alcoholics Anonymous big book, but they talk about being an addict, obviously, and it's really cool. I really like that program, actually.
Yeah,
we don't have CA meetings here, but
CA is really cool. That was the first meeting I went to because CA is huge in Los Angeles for crack cocaine.
Yeah, that would make sense.
So I started hearing real recovery, real recovery times, real recovery stories. And at first I'm like, oh my God, like this is fucking incredible. Like, and I started learning so much, like recovery, what recovery is as opposed to what addiction was like.
Yes.
And I started hearing the solution and not the problem, and people weren't complaining, and people were happy to be there. And I met a lot of really cool people in CA that I'm still friends with to this day.
Good.
So yeah, I know how beneficial it is. You can go through the CA steps, and it's basically like AA, except for it's got an NA mixture with the workbook, like you said.
Yeah.
So that's really awesome. Thanks, Christine, for sitting down. I know it's hard for us to get our schedules together with Pennsylvania to Alaska.
Yes, for sure. But I appreciate it. I love what you're doing. Having a podcast has always been like something I've dreamed of, and I'm super ADHD, so I never see anyway. But
I'm celebrating Recovery Month by releasing a new episode every single day this month.
That's so awesome.
So
I will definitely be listening in and keep doing what you're doing, because I support and believe in wholeheartedly, like the principles of the 12-step programs. I would never break anybody else's anonymity, you know what I mean, ever. And I think that it serves a purpose. But for me, I choose not to recover quietly. I believe that I have to recover out loud. I'm sure our brothers and sisters are dying alone because people are too quiet. And
I am all about recovering out loud. I talk about it all the time. I talk about my podcast all the time. Now it's just YouTube. I used to do the audio ones, but it got to be too much work to keep up with both. And I find that people are more likely to watch YouTube videos than they are to listen to stuff. So I switched to focus only on YouTube lately. And I want people that are still in addiction to find this podcast and hear stories like yours or hear stories like mine and feel like they can connect to something. I try to get people who are AA, NA, Smart Recovery. My wife does Recovery Dharma.
Oh my gosh, I have a friend that does that, and I love it. I've been to a couple meetings, and it's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, they do. She does on Zoom.
Yeah, that's the ones that I've been to, but they are incredible.
Yeah, she does them every day at 9 a.m. And then she does one like at 8 o'clock at night. She'll do a couple at 9 o'clock at night. And
That is awesome.
yeah, she loves it. So it's not many people have heard of Recovery Dharma, but she loves it. She wasn't big into AA, so she's going through her inquiries with Recovery Dharma and loves it. I've had her on. I've had somebody else on from Recovery Dharma, and I'm all about
awesome.
hearing different ways people are in recovery because not everybody's going to follow AA or NA, and I find it important. Yeah.
But, right, and I mean the times that we're in, like we got to figure out a way to support the masses, because just like not everybody was addicted the way that I was addicted. Not like you said, it's not one size fits all, and all we need to be there to show up for people and love them and let them find their way.
Yeah, find ways to connect, almost like how we have that connection of our
fiance. I know.
But if we weren't recovering out loud, you never would have knew that about us.
Exactly. That right there is so it. That's it. I mean, like that whatever that quote is, that the opposite of addiction is connection. And I so believe that. I mean, for how long I felt so lost and alone and alienated, which I was doing to myself. And I didn't really know that I could just say like, hey, I'm going through this, and that so many other people would be like, wow, me too,
No, I know.
Like the other day, I got to meet a woman from Washington State. I just got to tell you this and I'll let you go, because this blew my mind. And after 11 years, my mind is still being blown, and I'm like having an aha moment in the right way, right? She went to prison, and she was in prison for a long time. Got out of prison, went to law school. They graduated law school with honors, and they denied her to take her Washington bar exam. She sued them, and the Supreme Court won. Is a practicing lawyer, and now is on the legislature. She's one of only six people, at least, that are speaking out loud that have lived experience with not just addiction. There's probably lots of those, but that have also been to prison. And like, it's crazy. And she speaks about it and so openly, and that is not normal, especially for somebody at that high level,
Yep. No, that's incredible to be like still out about it. You're not trying to hide who you were. You're not trying to hide your past.
Right.
Yeah, you don't hear that too often. You hear people hiding behind who they are now, and they want to hide who they were.
Right.
No, I'd much rather be extremely out loud about my mom. She'll be like, I can't watch your show because I can't hear all the stories that you guys tell. And I'm like, it's okay, Mom. It's not for you. The show isn't for you.
And the people that need it will hear it.
Yeah, exactly. And she's like, okay, as long as you don't think I'm not supporting you.
Oh, what a sweet mom.
Like, I still support you, what you do. I love what you do for everyone that's an addict. I can't watch it. I'm like, I know.
I guess I can see that. Like I said, my whole family and literally everybody that I know either has been directly impacted or was impacting people. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I'm in awe, even hearing that. Like when I meet people that have like moms that are normies or have never, you know what I mean? It fascinates me. But I also love it because that's exactly it. I grew up how I grew up, and you said that you didn't grow up crazy or bad, you know what I mean? And
we went on family vacations. We were together all the time. We played sports, and no one like abused me. It was just a curiosity that got taken out of control. Absolutely. I was the oldest of three, and I was the one that my brother and sister, far from alcoholics, far from being addicts. They bought houses. I still never bought a house. You know what I mean? Like, I made all the mistakes so they didn't have to.
Yeah.
And, I started drinking at a young age because I was curious.
Yeah.
And, I started smoking weed because I was curious. I started smoking pills because I was curious. And I've always just followed that curiosity. It wasn't like anything. If anything, grief and loss has a lot to do with my story. And why I used in my 20s was grief and loss. Like I said, my best friend died June 12th, 2012. He was in a car accident. And I never fully processed that accident. And 3 months later, I started dating Colleen. And we had been friends since 6th grade. So it wasn't like we were only together for 3, you know what I mean?
Right.
We had been close friends since we were
Yeah,
10,
absolutely.
11,
Great
12 years
kid.
old.
Yeah.
So it's still hard to talk about Colleen. It definitely doesn't get easier. So I feel for you with Chad because I know how it feels to try to remember somebody that was so integral in your journey that
Yeah.
you can't go back and save. And you know what I mean? It's just one of those things that we have to deal with as people of like, we lost that person, but you know, we're still doing good and they're living on through us.
Yep.
So that's all.
Absolutely. Well, I think you're amazing. Keep doing what you're doing, and I'll definitely be sharing your podcast out. I think it's great.
I'll talk to you later, Christine.
Awesome. Thanks.
Bye bye.
Bye.